You're listening to Catalyst for Change, and my name is Jessica Huckabee, your host. I started this podcast to learn what makes people resilient after challenging events and how they've used those series of events as a catalyst for change in their life. You'll hear stories of resiliency and strength, so get ready, sit back, and be prepared to be inspired. Today, my guest is Jared Flannagan. He describes himself as a father, a friend, an addict, a washed-up rapper, and host of What is TWS podcast. We'll be talking about the experience he had in February 2018 when he attempted suicide after a long struggle with depression and alcoholism. Tell me more about the challenges that you were facing in 2018.
So yeah, I think I can't remember when I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, but I had been off and on meds for maybe like 2 or 3 years at that point. Felt like it's something I probably dealt with, my whole life. But growing up, where I grew up, it was kind of, if you complain about depression or things like that, people tell you, you just need to go to church more, or you need Jesus, something like that.
Yeah.
So it never really got addressed, and I think for some reason, the way the world works right now, like it's almost more acceptable to be an alcoholic than it is to be depressed. Uh, so, for years, I drank a lot and people knew I drank a lot. And that was kind of like my claim to fame. It made me life of the party. But like
Yeah.
discussing why he drinks so much, seemed to kind of be out of the question. So yeah,
It was
anyway,
just a norm. Yeah.
yeah, they
It
just
seems like
ignore it.
it's acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so yeah, off and on meds for a couple years, and then, got back to, drinking pretty heavily. And just trying to escape things, trying to everyday life seemed to be like I used to look at people like, how are you just okay, like how does everything not bother you, how are people normal, or is everybody dealing with this and nobody talks about it, or I just couldn't
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah. And so when did you know that drinking was a problem? Was it only drinking?
It was only drinking, and I consider myself an addict, not so much an alcoholic. I would say, alcohol is my drug of choice, but probably because that was just the thing I had access to. I
Yeah.
I don't believe that had I had access to something else, if cocaine or heroin, or if other drugs were just presented to me, that I would have turned them away. Like I just happened to be easy. It was easy to get alcohol, so that's what I turned
Accessible.
to most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So now what was the catalyst to make you change your mind about your drinking?
Man, it took a lot. It got really bad. I was living in DC, and lost a couple jobs behind it. Never got fired because of my drinking, but I would
Yeah.
just stop going to, I would just abandon jobs. I would just stop showing up.
Okay.
And I
And you
had
had
a,
a really good job at as in IT for Whole Foods.
yeah, that was once I was here. That was the last job, like right as things got the worst. But back home in DC, I worked for the federal government in IT. I worked for the White House. I worked for the Pentagon. Um,
Yeah.
um, I ran the gambit in terms of like government organizations. And yeah,
Yeah.
I had a skill where I felt like I could always get work. So, when things would get really bad and I would just stop showing up,
You knew
it'd
you
go
could
for a
find.
couple months, and then I, find another job and start the cycle all over again.
Yeah, because that what you're in is very in demand. What your
Yeah.
skill set is. Yeah, being in tech,
They
and
would be kind of like building up. I would build everything up, and things would be going well and feeling successful, and then I would pull it all down on my head and rinse, repeat. And
do you think the depression had something to do with that? The drinking, and then thinking, okay, well, I'll just leave it and leave that job and
absolutely, like yeah,
yeah,
it was much. Things would get so overwhelming that it would seem easier to just you know throw it all away and
yeah,
maybe start over. I would have jobs that job at Whole Foods was my dream job. Like I believed in that company. It's a great company.
yeah.
Um, I drank the Kool-Aid. I went to work every day feeling like an imposter, and that somebody was eventually going to realize I didn't deserve to be there. And I was going to get fired. And I went and sat at work with that fear and that anxiety every day.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, getting off work and getting a chance to get a drink so I could not feel that way,
So
for a
that
little bit.
depression and yeah,
Yeah,
and how you felt like you weren't supposed to be there, like you didn't have the right to be there, and
right.
even though you did, and people probably saw you as capable and knowing what what you're doing with your work, and but it's just that underlying fear of and
That fear.
depression.
I
Yeah,
remember being at work one day and my boss calling me into his office and taking I took my badge off my neck and was holding it in my hand because my expectation was I was walking into his office to get fired. And
yeah,
I walked into his office and 5 minutes into the conversation, he was telling me I was getting a bonus. So, it's like my perception and
yeah,
reality were just two
just
completely different
off.
things. Yeah.
And how did
So
you
my
get that?
perception was
Yeah,
that was the truth to me.
yeah. No, I mean, was there tools that you use now to get your perception and like knowing that you are good enough and you have those skills? Is there any tools that you learned from
Yeah. So
that?
meditation has been a huge thing for me. Beyond medication, I think medication allowed me to get out of those fogs for long enough to be able to listen to instruction, to
Yeah,
find some tools. But meditation has been huge for me. It allows me to realize that like my brain is going to tell me stories. That's what it's designed to do. It's
yeah,
trying to figure things out and it's trying to predict stuff, and it's going to tell me stories. And I need to be aware of when I'm in a story. When I'm not in reality right now, when I'm not in now,
hmm,
when I'm in a story, when I'm thinking about the past, when I'm thinking about the future, when I'm trying to figure out what somebody else is thinking. These
yeah,
are all things that I don't have the ability to know or understand. That can't be real.
yeah,
I need to. And I sometimes sit and say to myself out loud, well, out loud if I'm alone, or in my head if I'm around people. But I have to repeat the word now. I have to bring myself to the now every once in
yeah.
a while and realize I've drifted off into a story. I've drifted off into worrying about the future. Or I've drifted off into being embarrassed about the past, or I've drifted off into trying to figure out what somebody else is thinking. And
No,
that's not a place I can live.
yeah, that's really powerful. And there's so many people that are they don't know much about meditation. And how did you learn about meditation? Like where did you go to learn more?
Recovery 12-step programs and recovery meetings. Yeah, I went to a lot of meditation meetings, and that's part of what somebody explained to me is that it was just training myself to be able to recognize when I was in the story.
Yeah,
To be focus on the breathing and to let your mind drift. And when you find yourself drifting, have a way to come back.
yeah.
Come back to now. And that's, yeah, I talk about that a lot, like living in the here and now. Like we can only do things, we can only affect anything in the here and now. When we're off in those other places, we can't do anything about those things. We're powerless in those areas. We have power here in the moment. So
Yeah,
stay
so
in the
stay
moment.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And I've been learning about that myself lately, and there's so much to learn. So yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate your insight into it. I'm just starting that path again,
Yeah.
to get into meditation. Now, you mentioned that at one point your drinking caused you to be homeless. Do you
Yeah.
mind telling me more about that?
Yeah. It's crazy how it happened. You see people like, homeless and you wonder how it happens, and it happens fast. Um,
Yeah.
uh, my wife left, and we gave up, the home that we were living in, and for a while, and I had lost my job again because of the drinking. So I got the job at Whole Foods, but I wasn't established enough to get my own place. For a while, I was living out of a hotel,
Yeah.
and it was during that time at the hotel, like I said, going to work every day and just being afraid, the anxiety and the depression from the, my perception of what was going on. And then, coming home and I was alone. My wife is no longer there. My daughter is no longer there. It's just me.
Yeah.
So I was drinking heavily and just really couldn't see how things were going to change for me. So it was at that point that I made the decision to attempt suicide.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, there was no contingency plan. Like this was it. There was not supposed to be a tomorrow.
Yeah.
And luckily, yeah, I can tell you vividly every moment of me being in that hotel room and the decisions and the planning and everything um, that led up to the suicide attempt and during it.
Yeah.
I really can't tell you what I was thinking when I finally did reach out for help and ask a friend, to get me to the emergency room. Um, and I don't know what it is that pushed me to make that decision, but thankfully I did. But yet there wasn't supposed to be a tomorrow, so all of a sudden there was a tomorrow. I didn't have a job. I no longer had a place to stay, um, and I was
Yeah.
homeless. I was in a hospital and afraid to be released because I didn't know where I was going to go.
Yeah. And so how did they help you at the emergency room?
So yeah, I live in Austin, Texas, and I have to say,
Okay.
I give a huge shout out to Texas for how they handle mental health and homelessness. In the hospital, the doctors, talk to me about whether or not I wanted help, and will be willing to try to get some help. And so,
Yeah.
upon being released, they put me in a cab with the instructions that the driver could only drop me off one location, the
Yeah.
address they gave me. But they dropped me off at a respite home. I stayed there for about a week. They got me on my meds. They got me state funded insurance so that my meds were paid for. Uh, got me stable on that. I went from one respite home to another respite home. Um, and at the second respite home, they got me set up on how I could get state funding for rehab,
Yeah.
and that was another really quick process. It took less than a day for me to
That's
show up
really good.
someplace, get an
Yeah.
interview, get the funding, and then from that point it was me calling places and finding a bed. And yes, in the course of maybe 2 or 3 months, I went from in the hospital, recovering from a suicide attempt, homeless, to in a rehab. And then once I got out of rehab, I found a sober living home,
Yeah.
and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's so amazing that you had that opportunity and you got to meet the right people in your
Yeah.
path and that you actually reached out for help. A lot of people don't do that. So I'm thankful that you did and you're here today and to tell us your story. I'm just like I get all yeah, I work with homeless vets, so I'm like I get a little emotional about homelessness and
Yeah.
suicide and that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah. So so now you're living in a home where there's other people that are recovering. Is that what you're saying? Or
Yes,
that are
I live in
yeah.
an Oxford House, sober
Okay.
living. Um,
Oxford. Okay.
Oxford House is nonprofit, so everyone here is recovering from some sort of substance abuse, and
Okay.
we're our own built-in support system.
Nice. And so you all support each other and they people know what you're going through.
Yeah,
People have
you
lived
live in
that
a house
life and
with
that experience
right.
or some
You live in a
form of
house
it.
with people that identify with what you're going through, and you know,
Yeah.
we go to meetings together and we talk to each other about our stuff. And it's not all drugs and alcohol. Sometimes it's just life, because the majority of addiction is not the substance; it's the stuff in life that drives you to the substance.
Yeah.
And
Like you mentioned depression or not feeling like anxiety about not
yeah,
feeling like you belong where you're at
right.
basically. Yeah. Yeah. So how are you paying it forward now? It sounds like you're doing some things to help other people.
Yeah, so I have my podcast, and while it originally started, as more of just me talking about random stuff, mental health and addiction have become major, you know, subjects for me. They're things that are close to my heart. I learned a lot about my perception of people and being homeless, for that short period of time. I think when you haven't identified that you're dealing with some of these things, you look at people that are dealing with them in a certain light, and then
Yeah.
having all of that happen, so quickly and so abruptly, almost not realizing what was going on, just waking up, going from a systems engineer at Whole Foods to now I'm homeless in a rehab, uh,
Yeah, that's
recovering from a suicide attempt.
yeah.
All of a sudden, uh, you realize it can happen to anybody, and and
Anybody.
I meet so many
Yeah.
people in the recovery community, um, and these are not, weak-minded people. I have my ex-sponsor was an Olympic athlete. Um,
Yeah.
you know, got a bronze medal in I think the biathlon. Um, but yeah, it's crazy to see some of these people and how talented, people are in this recovery community, and that,
Yeah.
it's not something that happens to people that are just weak-minded or lack discipline. Some of these people are very disciplined and very strong and successful in so many other areas.
Yeah. And we need
So
to change
yeah,
that view that society has about mental illness and about addiction, because it is a disease. It is
yeah,
it's not something you choose. You don't wake up and say, I want to
no,
be an alcoholic or I want to be depressed all the time, or have these issues. So it's something we need to really, I'm glad you're advocating to change that along
yeah. I
with
definitely want
others.
to, make it change the way we look at people like that. I had a friend ask me not too long ago, if them wanting a drink every afternoon made them an alcoholic. And my answer to that was, one, I can't tell you what makes you an alcoholic. If you feel
Yeah.
like you have a problem, that's something to investigate. But I tell them, for me, it wasn't wanting a drink every afternoon that made me an alcoholic. It was not wanting a drink, but feeling like I had to have one.
Yeah.
Uh, that made me, and so it's just right now for me, it's a lot of that is trying to help people understand those differences. A person that drinks every day may not necessarily be an alcoholic, or have an addiction program problem. A person that
Yeah.
doesn't want to but feel like they have to, like they can't handle life without it.
Yeah.
Um, that's more of the issue. And so yeah, my podcast is a part of it. I've gotten really involved in the recovery community in terms of like Oxford houses, and we do presentations and you know trying to provide. I've opened a new house within Oxford, so we can try to provide more beds, for men looking for safe places to live,
Yeah.
with support. So yeah, it's changed my view of homelessness. It's changed my view of addiction. It's changed my view of mental health,
Yeah.
um, and it is something I want to. I don't know if normalize is the right word, but just help the general community understand that it's not a lack of willpower, and it can happen to anyone. And there's
Now,
probably somebody that right now that is fighting for their life. They may
yeah.
be standing right in front of you, but they're fighting for their life internally.
Yeah.
And to create a space where they feel safe enough to ask for help,
No,
uh,
that's really important.
is very important.
Now, where do you do these presentations in the community?
Right now, we go to a lot of rehab places.
Okay.
It's letting guys know that there are places to go. I was leaving rehab still homeless.
Yeah.
So the fact that I was able to get off a Greyhound bus and show up at a house, interview, and have a place to stay that night was a blessing, a miracle for me.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, we go to those kind of places just so those guys know there are like we were talking earlier. There are people and organizations and places that want to help. Uh,
Yeah.
that need to help. Part of the 12-step philosophy is for me to get better and to stay better, I need to help someone else you know be better. And so
Yeah.
me going places and trying to help someone else is just as much for me as it is for them, and it is that way for a large community of people. And you don't realize they're there until you reach out, and
Yeah.
somebody reaches back, and then you see like, wow, there's this whole world of people that
Has
just
this,
want to help.
has this work and this experience made you want to still want to change careers and be in like drug and alcohol, like counseling, or do you want to stay with your first role in IT?
No, I do. If I could find, I am looking for, kind of the place that I fit, in this world, career wise. I mean, right now it's just something I do because like I said, I need to do it. It helps me.
Yeah.
I want to help. I want to change the perception of some of this stuff. And if there was somewhere down the line where I could, find a way to make a living involved in this, that
Yeah.
would be awesome. It hasn't
Or like
presented
a
itself
side.
as of yet, but
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Or
it
something on
did,
the side where you
yeah,
volunteer at least and still do your tech work. If that's now, are you working right now or?
I am. I am.
Okay.
I'm back in IT. Um,
Nice.
I'm working. Yeah, thanks to Oxford, I was able to. I came out of the rehab. I was homeless, but I found a place to stay. I worked for McDonald's for a little bit, until I could get myself back to where I needed
Yeah.
to be. But things are,
And
um,
now you're back in IT where your training is and where you
yeah.
were successful before. Now, how do you feel now that you're back? Do you still feel the same way you did before about
Um,
not feeling like you belong there?
there are moments, and I feel like there are always going to be moments, and that's where like the meditation and the tools that you were talking to me about earlier, come into play. The
Yeah.
difference now is that when I have those moments, um, I know one that they'll pass.
Yeah.
It's not, it's a moment. I have some tools to kind of help me get out of them a little quicker, and one of those tools is finding somebody to help. I
Yeah.
do something on my show and on my social media called, what can Flan do for you? And normally if I'm doing that, that's me reaching out to help you because that would help me out of something that I'm in right now. Like I'm in a dark place, and if I could be of service to somebody else, that would help me out.
So tell me what that usually looks like.
A lot of times it's just reaching out to people, just you know,
Yeah.
and whereas in the past I may have been down and my text messages would have been to tell somebody else what's wrong with me so we can talk about my problem. Today, when I'm down, my text messages are to somebody else. How are you doing? How's it going? What's going on? Let me
Yeah.
get out of my head and my problems
And
and
helps.
and help somebody else, or just say hello.
Yeah.
Because I got messages during some of my dark times from people that were just check-ins, and they meant the world to me. So you never know what that one message you send to somebody else, may
Just
mean to
checking in.
them. Just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So you have that. I'm going to post that link to your site and how to get a hold of you and
Okay. Yeah.
how you can, maybe connect with others that are struggling, that are going through something, right? And
Yeah.
that's what that is all about, what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
I would love to, if anyone ever needs to talk or in need of resources or places to go, if you're looking to reach out for help and just want to make sure you're reaching in the right directions, anything I could do. If you just want to talk, if you just want to know that what you're experiencing is that you're not terminally unique. I like that phrase. I learned that in recovery.
Terminally unique. I like that
Terminally
too.
unique. That there are other people, that deal with these things and that have these thoughts
Yeah.
and are willing to talk and want to talk. You might be
Yeah.
saving their lives by giving them a call.
No, that's good. Now, can you think of anything maybe we didn't touch on? We touched on a lot of really good stuff, and I think this is really helpful for a lot of people. Um, is there anything else that you'd like to mention?
It's just like I said, you're not alone. As lonely as it feels, you're not. And yeah, all you have to do is reach out, and you'll be amazed at the amount of hands that reach back. Like you'll have to turn down help,
Yeah.
from all of the people, the outpouring of resources and help that will come your way, because this is a real issue. I think it happens to anybody, um, and just yeah, and just to forgive yourself. Um, you know, a lot of what happens sometimes in these recovery programs is we have to work through resentments and forgive other people, but we have to remember to put ourselves on that list. We've done a lot of harm to ourselves, and
Yeah.
sometimes we hold on to resentments against ourselves for the things that we've done.
Shame, right?
And, yeah, and
Yeah.
you gotta forgive yourself too. Um, you know, somebody told me you're doing the best you can right now.
Yeah.
We,
One foot
you
in.
can get help to do
Yeah.
better, but sometimes you're doing the best you can in the moment.
Yeah.
And you did the best you could in the past. You got to leave it there, and let's be better today.
Yep. No, that's so true. And so, yeah, I encourage people to reach out to Jared and reach out to somebody in your
Yeah,
community because it's really important. You're not alone. You're never alone.
not alone.
So, Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate hearing your story. It really speaks to me too. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This was good.
Okay, good. You've been listening to Catalyst for Change, and my name is Jessica Huckabee, your host. Join us next week for another story of resiliency. And please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and feel free to leave me a comment or email me at catalystforchange20@gmail.com, or on Facebook, we have a page at Catalyst for Change Resiliency.